Good afternoon, everyone. This is Maverick from Maverick PC Gaming here. Today, I want to talk a little bit further about a subject that, over the past few months for me, has actually become uh, it's become important because I've actually started to use Linux distros a lot more than I ever had before, and the reason for that is because I just don't have time for nonsense. And there's a lot of times when I just want to get on my machine, do what I have to do and get off. Not every computer is a huge beefy gaming rig with two or three graphics cards and an octa-core processor with liquid cooling. That actually um, is considered the one percenter among PC owners. And what I mean by that is it's really only a very small majority of PC owners who actually have massive gaming rigs, and an even smaller percentage of them who actually build their own rigs. So having said that, we move back into Linux. Um, and so what I've done is I've taken basically all my mobile devices, which are my laptop, my tablet, and I've put Linux distros on them. And as my laptop isn't very powerful as far as gaming goes, it still can do some shooters, and it does indie games really well working under the Intel HD graphics, running Ubuntu 14.04 LTS. But what offends me, guys, is, here we are several decades later after Linus Torvalds was the only one who didn't want to sell out to major corporations and said, well, I'm going to continue to make my stuff free, and I'm going to continue to ask it to be a donate if you can kind of thing, and which I've done. And the reason I've done it is because I appreciate that the Linux community and Linux developers and consumers are willing to contribute to countless Linux projects, whether it be the different distributions or their servers or the software. Um, the majority of stuff, 99% of stuff that you see in the Ubuntu Software Center and other software centers is free. I mean, it's free of charge, and not to mention the operating system themselves, whether you're running Ubuntu, Mint, Fedora, Peppermint, Voyager Linux, whatever it is, Kali, it's free of charge. Okay, and every one of those distributions is amazing, especially if you're, like I said, you're not a major gamer. Um, which swings me all the way back around to my original point. I really think it's messed up that gaming companies refuse to acknowledge that Microsoft has the monopoly on gaming. Um, and I know that through all strict definition of monopoly means that they are the only company that can provide that service. And although that's not completely true, for the average consumer, it pretty much is. Because if you're a PC owner and you know that you're going to want to play, Black Ops 3, or one of the Battlefields or Titanfall or anything like that when it first comes out, things that are really heavily dependent on things like DirectX and the C++ Visual Studios, and if you're running Linux purely, you're screwed. And that's not the fault of the Linux community, because it's not their fault that these companies refuse to acknowledge that there's not just Windows gamers out there. Um, Now, see, it's not black and white for me either, because as an owner of the full Adobe Creative Master Suite, it would be reckless for me to abandon Windows anyway, because when you have an $1,800 program that you know is not going to run on Linux anyway, that would be kind of reckless and just downright ignorant for me to say, well, I'm just going to use Linux now and it doesn't matter. Now, as far as all the other programs like, LibreOffice and everything, things that can easily replace Office 2016, or, Simple Screen Recorder, which could easily be used in place of Bandicam, and other things that are already available on Linux, like Spotify or Virtual Machine, things like that. And the graphics cards companies are coming along nicely as far as Linux goes. For example, I know AMD is having a very, very large issue with Linux right now, and not because they're not willing to address the issues. It's just that they're currently working on it, and a lot of guys running AMD cards, their systems have been breaking, and there's really no news as to why. Nvidia is doing really well. especially when you install a new Linux distro. Most of them detect that there's proprietary drivers right away, and they work phenomenally. Multi-monitor, everything. Not SLI quite yet, but I mean, we're getting there, guys. And I know that in my past couple videos, I've rubbed a couple of people the wrong way, and I think that what I'm trying to do here is explain that that's not, what I was trying to do. What I was trying to do in essence was just make people realize that although Linux is bigger than it's ever been, um, guys like me, guys who are um, not willing to wait, and I'm not going to lie about my lack of patience because there's no reason to, okay? But again, that is not the fault of the Linux community. The Linux community is an incredible group of people who dedicate their lives to making people's lives easier. What kind of better person is there than that? But it's not their fault that the companies, are only going to write games that can be run fundamentally under the DirectX architecture. It's not their fault. And even so, they still come out with programs like Wine and Play on Linux that can at least run some games, which is better than nothing. Okay, and then you have companies like Valve, which I think are the biggest cooperators as far as the Linux community goes right now, because they're the ones who are coming out with all their games are available on Linux platforms as quickly as they are on Windows, which is amazing. Left 4 Dead, Left 4 Dead 2, Counter-Strike, Team Fortress, all that stuff runs, and it runs under OpenGL beautifully. Okay, so when I say that you can't do the things on Windows, rather on Linux that you can on Windows, it's not because I'm saying that Linux is incapable or the Linux community is incapable, because I am part of that community. Um, for all those of you who choose to get offended, I feel like you didn't listen enough for me to say reality is reality, okay? And if you have thousands of dollars worth of games and software suites and things like that that you need to use that will not work properly on the Linux side of things, then it's a no-brainer as to what you have to use. And I love Windows, okay? I love Windows as much as I love Ubuntu, because they each have their things that I love about them. There's no one person who can say that he's a true computer guy or girl and say that, oh, it's only, well, this platform only. No, because OS X has things that Windows doesn't, and Windows has things that OS X doesn't, and they both have things that Linux doesn't, and Linux has things that they both don't have. So you can't compare it to things, okay? It's like trying to compare a motorcycle and a car. They each have their own uses, and they each have their own impracticalities. But I do think, guys, that I've been in constant contact with several companies, asking them about getting support for Linux, and I just get the runaround, and it's annoying. And I hope that this video, inspires at least a few people to get involved too. And now, when I say other companies, I don't mean just guys like EA and Activision and Square Enix. I mean guys like Logitech and Nostromo, for gaming peripherals. I haven't found a good gaming peripheral interface for any of my gaming peripherals, whether it be my Razer Nostromo or my Logitech G13, okay, my Logitech G502, my Logitech G19. All of these things, all they do is just flash a Logitech logo on the Linux side, and that's annoying. Because, yeah, there are scripts out there, whatever, and people create it out of the kindness of their own heart, but the Linux community shouldn't have to do that. Okay, and although I'm more than happy and more than grateful when they do come out with stuff that, it makes your hardware work a little bit better, it's unfortunate that these companies refuse to acknowledge that the Linux consumer base is growing. Okay, and it's not going to stop. It's only getting better, and Valve has already acknowledged this. And so, guys, for all of you out there who've been offended by what I have said, or it's not that, I am an avid Linux user. I use Linux on everything but my main desktop. My phone is Android, which is Linux at its core. My laptop is Ubuntu. My tablet is Ubuntu Touch. So I've even had, I even was dual booting for a while Ubuntu 14.04 with Windows 10, but then I took it off because it was impractical. There was no reason for me to have Ubuntu on my main desktop, because all the things that I needed to do as far as work and production and editing and gaming was on the Windows side. And although I know there are things you can tinker around with and mod and edit to try to get a game to work somewhat properly, I think that the Linux community deserves better than that from the companies, because ultimately these hardware companies and gaming companies and peripheral companies are still getting money from people, and a lot of them are in the Linux community. And I think it's bullshit that you can buy a great gaming keyboard and hook it up to your machine, and if you're running a Linux box, you're almost certain that you're not going to get the same experience with that product as you would if you're running a Windows OS. And I understand that companies have to make money. That's fine. But in the same instance, they have to also consider where this money is coming from. And the Linux community is not going away. No matter what they say, no matter what they do, the Linux community is not going away. Gaming is better than it's ever been in Ubuntu, and I've been playing games nonstop on my laptop because I don't want to be at my desktop all the time. I love being at my desktop, don't get me wrong, but there are just times when it's not, you just do not want to get up. And if I can want to play Super Meat Boy on Steam, I just launch it on my laptop, which is Ubuntu, and I'm good to go. Controller support seems to be pretty good because I do play Sidewinders and platformers with a controller. I don't use the keyboard because I really don't feel like getting carpal tunnel syndrome. And that's one thing which was surprising to me, that I can plug in an Xbox 360 controller in Ubuntu 14.04.3, and all the games so far have detected it just fine with the prompts just fine. And it's amazing to me because that controller is a product of Microsoft and it runs just fine. So, it's hit or miss, guys. And if you're running Linux, of course, anyone who's run Linux more than 2 minutes knows you have to expect for things to not always end up the way that you want. But a true Linux user will continue to use Linux, and I'm not putting Windows back on my laptop, and I'm not putting it back on my tablet because I love how much better those devices are optimized with Ubuntu. And it's not that Windows doesn't optimize it well, it's just that for what I use my laptop for, I don't need Windows installed where I can install Photoshop and all sorts of stuff because I don't use my laptop for that. It's a Core i3 clocked at 1.7 gigahertz. There's a reason why I have an extremely expensive desktop to do things like that on there. So for all of you those in the Linux community, all those who are working on projects constantly, guys who are working on Ubuntu 16.04, the new Fedora workstation, Elementary, all that stuff, guys. All, Mint, you guys are doing a phenomenal job, and I hope that you all hear this, and I hope that you guys don't stop doing the work that you do, because you guys do make a lot of people's lives easier. I mean, from people who just don't like Microsoft to people who don't necessarily have money for a Microsoft OS at the time, for people who just don't like the direction that their operating system is going. And it's not only Windows. I've known plenty of OS 10 users that have reverted over to Linux, Ubuntu or something else, and and they love it, and then they never want to look back. So I really appreciate everything you guys do. I hope I'm glad to contribute to you guys in any way that I can. I will continue to petition companies to make dedicated user interfaces for us gamers on Linux, because that seems to be a very big subject right now and it's not going away. And although not a lot of people are aware that this is an issue, I think that they should become aware and take some accountability for the fact that all of their customers are not satisfied. So until the next time, guys, I say thank you for watching. And as always, any questions or comments, please link them to me below. Hit me with a like if you like, a dislike if you didn't like, and I'll talk to you soon.